Our first conversation is about national security and not the hard journalistic whatever you've had all week. Let's try to give ourselves some perspectives, that'll help us all to take positions. I've been concerned, Joke, about the fact that over the years, when we talk about insecurity, we're talking about it like it's only something we have to deal with now. And we are not factoring in the next generation, who are already, I talked about them earlier, in their youth service year now. They get into the work environment and then they have to be learning these things. Anyway, quick update. President Bola Tinubu on Wednesday declared a nationwide security emergency, ordering an unprecedented surge in military and police recruitment as kidnappings and terrorist attacks sweep across multiple states. The police will be recruiting 20,000 additional officers, raising the ongoing drive to 50,000, and authorized the military and Department of State DSS to enlist thousands more. This was some kind of part of the campaign, should I say, promises. The president has said, and now it's activated.
Activated quickly too.
The president also said, look, all VIPs and what have you attached to everywhere. All pulled back.
I watched some events over the week and you don't see...
No policemen, no orderlies.
No orderlies, wow.
And the IG revealed that there are more than 11,000 that have been pulled back into the police force. And I'm wondering, we are grateful to God for that. But there are those who are also saying the police is going to be losing a lot of money from that. Because, but anyway, you know what? It's a presidential order. There's nothing that you can do about it.
Security concerns. And they will get a boom from this.
Yes. Whether or not they're even licensed to do some of those things for VIPs is another conversation altogether. But let's look at certain things. As I said earlier, Joke, there are some things that we have tried before that worked. The JTF, Joint Task Force, with the military, the civilian JTF, they call it, and all of that. So did that work really? Were there oppositions? Were there issues with it? Then there are some that we never tried. And then there are some we started. I'm not sure how wonderfully, if at all, they're working. And that is the issue of constabulary. That the police IG at some point, I don't know whether it was this IG or the previous one, that said that we have some police constables in the local communities. Whether that is working or not, we'll find out. And then the one that we have not tried, that we've been talking about for years, is state police.
Yes.
And yes, so let's have conversations around that this morning with two of our guests, but one of them is with us in the studio this morning. Buduka Johnson is a security expert and MD EPSS. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
I read an interview where you described what you had to do when you were, for want of a better word, a victim of kidnapping yourself. Tell us what happened and how did it go? Because one of the things that I'm hoping we'll be able to do, which people have had issues with, I don't know if you're aware of, is that trusting information to the hands of security agencies gives some other people problems. So give us a perspective on that.
Okay, thank you so much for having me again. And it's nice to relate this with what we're discussing. And so when my mom was kidnapped at 2 a.m., I got a call from the village. And by that time, the C4I was already in operation in River State. And I just dialed the number 112. And as soon as I dialed the number, someone picked up. And I said, oh, my mom had been kidnapped. And immediately, the police made their way. Half an hour later, from the village, the police called me. They had arrived at the village. Wow. So it was a system put in place by the governor then, And
how far back was this?
2010.
Okay.
Yes. And what we have with policing, and there were investigations. We made investigations and asked the community what they saw at that night. And we were told there was a gold car. So that's why you see that community information is very important. Someone just said, oh, we saw a gold car at 1 a.m. that night while we were coming from another village. So that was an information.
Yeah.
And then how you then use the information when it was time to give the ransom. On the delivery of the ransom, I was asked to go deliver the ransom, and I was worried. But by then you see that there was another company, telecom company, who was doing tracking. We could track the position where these people were, and we knew the coordinates, of their area. And when we finally decided to meet somewhere, on our way there, we saw a gold car. So because there was already an information, telling us there was a gold car
in the mix somewhere.
Yes, we marked it, and we knew that they were connected.
Yeah.
So I think that helped a lot to dissect, then we had the anti-kidnap unit. It was working. Then we had the law. The River State made a law and put a penalty on kidnap. So all these things were working. So about continuity now, which is our problem, so the shift in the security strategy comes with every new administration, and that was scrapped, so we have maybe wastage of some kind of implementation that would have, continued. So it's a continuation of those initiatives that's part of our problem.
Why do you think, it happens in that way, that we lack this continuity? Why does every government have to prove that, it has its own
originated
policies,
something,
or it originated? Why can't we have a situation where we say, this was in place before our government came into power? We saw that it worked.
And then we sustain it.
Or you hold a town hall meeting. What do you think worked with the previous administration that we should continue? Things like that. So, why do you think that happens?
I think you and I would want to reason why it happens. But, politically, people like to, like the governors or the leaders or the politicians like to, allude some kind of victory to themselves. I can't tell you what's on their mind, really. But I can say for sure that it's taking us back a lot of the time, because Timor Reeve was set up to deal with the transportation. And then after the next administration, that was scrapped. So you have funding, and you have a lot of the people employed back in unemployment. So that creates extra, insecurity. And I just want to show one thing that says, Social Security is key to peace and security. So whatever happens to Social Security, which is the responsibility around the government, has a lot to do with the peace and security and insecurity.
I'll follow up on Joke's question this way.
Okay.
One of the things that I'm curious to find out on this program, I'm hoping that our next guest, who is a former police DIG, will join us, is if we had strategies that worked before, what political expediency would make us jeopardize the stability and security of lives and property simply because we want to score a political point? Here's what I mean. Because it is possible to sustain these things. In 1979, the government of Obasanjo, as head of state, started what they called Operation Sweep. Operation Feed the Nation was an agricultural program. Following that, there was the Shagari government. Shagari didn't want to call it Operation whatever because it's not a military government, so they changed it to Green Revolution. But guess what? 4 years down the line, when the Buhari government came into power, that project was gone. Now, in the wake of this republic, the Lagos State was having serious security challenges with armed robbery and all sorts. Before 1999, it was the Buba Marwa government in Lagos. He started what they called Operation Sweep. Operation Sweep was an anti-robbery and anti-crime, whatever, security apparatus. When this government came in, when the Bola Tinubu governorship government came in at the time, they changed it from Operation whatever to Rapid Response Squad, which it still goes by today. And people still say it's one of the reasons that there is relative security in Lagos. So if these templates have worked before, and I'm sure there are other examples all over the nation, why is it difficult for us to say, look, you know what, I can still score my political point by just putting a new sheen on this one? The civilian JTF in Nigeria worked in the Northeast, unless there is some information that we are not aware of. So how come we're not hearing that anymore, such to the effect that we are not hearing all kinds of vulnerabilities?
Okay, you've said a whole lot. Okay, let's begin with, okay, what works? Let's start with the community policing. You know, the implementation has been very difficult, but you have seen like some pilot states like Lagos, Kano, Enugu. It works because they followed through. But there has to be a political will. And, you know, you have leadership that don't really care about rule of law and then the people. If you have the people as interest, let me even take you back in 1986 when the National Security Organization was abolished. That was the same year other agencies were created, as well as a private security Act, which is the Act Decree of 1986. And that was for internal security. And the purpose was that the guards would give information to the police. So there was a connection to all of that structure that was, you know, done by the then military head. So they looked at national security holistically and domiciled that law in Ministry of Internal Affairs. So over time or over the years, a lot of the security events have changed. They have even domiciled the regulation now on civil defense as a department. So the private security sector is under a department in civil defense, but the authority for licensing is the Minister of Interior. So now you see that we need to bring in a lot of all the other activities that happened in the sector, which is no longer just guards. There are other activities that happen in the private security sector. So it's left for the government to look holistically at all of these societal, you know, connections, the entire national security. If you have read the 2019 National Security Strategy, the private security companies were not even mentioned. But meanwhile, we're in every local government of the nation. We're providing security solutions to facilities, both government facilities and infrastructure, you know, that belongs to IOCs. So we're everywhere. So it takes a government who is serious to see where this is going, to look holistically at all of, you know, all of the activities and then regulate properly and then reenact a new law, which is an outdated law.
Okay, right. Right. Do you think, you know, with all that you've said, if we're to implement this and bring all these factors in, all these things that have happened in the past week, 2 weeks, Kebbi kidnapping, Niger kidnapping, Kwara, you know, and then pockets of others, you know, across countries, those we don't even hear about in the news. Do you reckon that we should factor in all these things, or if we had done so, we won't really have so much of these security issues taking place, even with the private security arrangements as well?
Okay, so the law has a requirement, which is every security company in Nigeria, we're like 1,450, even if the data is not, you know, public. Every security company has 2 retired government security forces within the company. That is a requirement for you to own a security company. So these companies have built, you know, capability over time. So when you're talking about a sector that employs 4 million security guards, you know, we're not the only country in the world that operate private security. So they should be armed. And that arm should be regulated in such a way that they would then provide that security for the VIP, which I commend the president for. I believe that there was a holistic, review of the entire system for him to have made that pronouncement. So there is a gap now. There's no better time for a paradigm shift than now. It's a decisive, solution that we have to look at integrating every part of these security activities. Because, I mean, you see a country that have invested so much in the ex-service people. They've had a lot of, professional training, and the country has done so much to make them become that professional that, they are. So they should be used, wisely within the private security sector. And if police also, which is police activity is public activity. If they close all of the gaps that we're doing, that they've left by using 11,000, like you mentioned, for VIP. If they close those gaps, send those police people to the communities, you will see that those gaps or those corridors that have been left open for the public will be filled in, and then we would have the private security do what South Africa is doing and do what other countries are doing with private security.
So let me be clear. I just want some clarity. So you're saying that on the average, there are 4 million soldiers that we have not activated. I mean, I'm talking about the security, the private security people. That's what you're saying. And you're saying also that we have all of these people all over the nation. Is it possible to have had them in those schools in good numbers where we had all these unfortunate incidences? Do you think they could have been able to prevent all of the kidnappings?
With a gun, yes, but not with batons, because we currently use batons and whistles. So with guns, yes, we will be able to, do that. They would have special training. They will have a regulation. In fact, the entire bill for the private security sector will then be met with, let's say, international best practice. Yes.
So, okay. Now, that's one of the things that one of the instruments we have that we have not been using. Now, there are those who would listen to what you're saying, functional as it sounds, and say, maybe this is not so realistic. Because on the one hand, you say you have the private security forces are expected to have retired security personnel, among them at least 2 of them. How much really do you think those could have done that? Those who would wonder and say, look, those are just political or maybe just corporate positioning. They may not be as operational in their interface with the people that you have to employ.
Well, guard service is not the only activity in the private security sector. Okay. Firstly, we must identify that. So we have guards, and then we also have people who are technically, sound. If you open up the sector with that new bill and create enabling environment for all the retired service personnel to function in that sector as a consultant, as it would be very beneficial to the national security.
Is that to say that the community police initiative of the federal government is not likely to be as effective as, or do you think maybe it's in the approach to it? You cited the 2019 security strategy, and yes, indeed, even though private security was not mentioned, one of the things that we were told that the security architecture from that 2019 was going to be more people-centric than government-centric. Whether or not that's played out, I'm wondering which one. Where do you stand?
Okay, so the minister, in fact, this is the first minister, Honorable Olubunmi Tunjojo, that knew his assignment as the authority for licensing. Because the Act says the minister shall appoint an officer to recommend for licensing. And that officer used to be domiciled in the Ministry of Internal Affairs and then passed now to Civil Defense. So he's on the verge of implementing that bill review, because we've had stakeholder engagement. We've had to meet with civil defense, with the ministry and the private security sector umbrella, which is, we have an association called Association of Licensed Private Security Practitioners of Nigeria, and we're all organized under one umbrella. But that's not the only activity in the sector. We're just 20% because we're connected to the Act of 1986. And you know that Act was just for internal security. So that meant they looked at internal security as part of, the solution. Like I said, that Act said the guard should give information to the police. So if you have over 700 local governments and you have security guards in largely part of it, they would give, but there has to be a communication and command and control center, there is.
But I'm still a little concerned. So there is talk of community policing. There's talk of state police. Now, you hold the private security system, and you have also spoken about the fact that there is a need for that cooperation between private security and government officials. But then, how easy has that been, particularly in the light of the fact that all we have heard about about community policing is just community policing is coming, or we are implementing it, or whatever, but it's really not as active. How would it work? In your own opinion, what are the gaps that you think we should be filling with that? I love the fact that you said that intelligence from the communities is very, very important. But where the information is not actionable, that's where some people usually have problems.
Okay, so the solution is not, it's multi-layered. So that's why it has to be an integrated solution that has all these things that we've discussed today. So yeah, the community policing has been tested in Lagos, Kano, but it hasn't been domiciled or scaled nationally, probably because of lack of will from the other states or funding, because funding is major, because you have to have equipment, you have to be able to give, and then the laws too that guard the community policing has not really been implemented properly, so that's just the issue here. And when you then want to implement it, you have to look at the reporting, what happens around it.
All right. Well, I guess now that we have heard it, the president has made that pronouncement, and the police is also kind of gearing up to align. So on the one hand, is they have 20,000 policemen to employ. On the other hand, the military has their own, personnel as well to employ. The question then would be, what is your perspective, and then we can close on that, on how we engage this policemen, 20,000 from all over the nation, in a way that would help to change the dynamics as opposed to just following the same routine? If you can hazard a perspective as to between how we have engaged policemen before and trained them into the force, and how we should be engaging them for the future.
Okay, thank you. So, firstly, we must also look at the big picture in this, in this solution. The big picture that has to do with national security, Nigeria as a country. We must demilitarize the country, because the military has their role to play. And then the police, both the ones that, are coming in as new injections, have to be posted to those communities, because they are the, let's say, the implementers of community policing. They have to then be posted, deployed, trained, and the Police Trust Fund, we were hoping that it would have maybe done a little justice. But so far, because we don't have data on how the monies were used or how the equipments were procured, there is no accountability. The government has to look at those things and see how best they can then professionalize that sector, and they have to reform the sector. So it's not just funding that is a problem, it's to reform the sector and engage them properly and deploy them properly.
You know, it's a long conversation.
Yeah.
I was hoping that we'll have the former police DIG in the studio, because he has quite some perspectives about and experience about this community policing thing. I guess we'll have to talk about it some other time, because there are some other perspectives that have come about this issue of state policing, that with state policing has to come state prisons, state, laws of police, state judiciary, and it's a whole gamut, because the police cannot just be in isolation. There are some other ancillary services that have to come with it.
So if you want to have my take, I think a hybrid solution will be good, where you have federal police, state police, and local policing, and all will be under one commission, because really jurisdiction will be a problem. Now, will a state charge someone in the federal? How would you handle that? So jurisdiction will have to be defined. Everything will have to be defined. But if they're under one commission, so we don't have that fear of maybe local government or maybe state governors using politics to weaponize, the state police. So it has to be done in such a way that we look at all the issues in that hybrid solution, and they will have the same commission.
I have to thank you very much for this morning, for your time this morning. Ms. Buduka Johnson is a security expert as well, MD of EPSS. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for sharing your experience. Okay, I understand that one of the things that have to happen from time to time is we talk about physical health and all. We don't talk about health security.
Yes, health security.
Perhaps it's a way to put it, because health financing is one way to guarantee that health will come. So let's see if we can have that conversation right after this timeout.